Husband used my $540,000 to open a restaurant, and when I asked why I wasn't at the launch party, he said, "It was just a small thing. Business contacts only. You wouldn't have fit in." I stood in our kitchen holding a glass of water I'd forgotten to drink, and I thought, fit in? I funded the whole thing. The lease, the build-out, the equipment, the permits, the PR firm he hired, every dollar. And I wouldn't have fit in. I smiled and said, "Of course, no problem." But I was already done. Let me back up, because this didn't happen overnight. Nothing like this ever does. I met my husband at 24. I was working as a project manager at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Charlotte. And he was charming and ambitious and always talking about this dream he had. A restaurant, a real one, farm to table, the kind of place that gets written up in magazines. He could describe it so vividly that you'd almost taste it. The lighting, the menu, the vibe. I fell in love with him and with his vision at the same time, and I think I spent years confusing the two. We got married when I was 26. He was 31. He had ideas. I had a salary, a savings account, and a mother who told me on my wedding day, "Make sure you always have your own money, baby." I laughed it off. I thought she was being old-fashioned. I was not old-fashioned enough. The first year was good. We were both working. He was in hospitality management. I was getting promoted. We talked about the restaurant as a someday thing, a dream we'd build toward together. Then his company downsized and he was laid off, and the someday thing suddenly became right now. "This is the push I needed," he told me. "I've been waiting for a sign. This is it." I want to be clear about something. I believed him. I genuinely believed in him. I'd watched him talk about that restaurant for 3 years and I thought, okay, let's do this. I was 28. I'd saved aggressively since I was 22, and I had money in accounts he didn't know the full extent of. Not because I was hiding anything, I just kept my finances organized the way my mother taught me. In separate buckets, separate accounts, separately labeled. He knew I made good money. He didn't know exactly how much I had set aside. We sat down and made a plan. I would fund the startup costs. He would run the restaurant costs. He would run the restaurant. Once it was profitable, we'd pay back my initial investment into a joint account and split ownership formally. That was the agreement. That was what we said out loud, to each other in our own kitchen. I transferred $540,000 over the next 14 months. It went in stages. First, $200,000 for the lease and build-out on a space he found in the Noda neighborhood. A good location, I'll admit that. Then another $180,000 for equipment, kitchen appliances, the custom bar he insisted on, the sound system. Then another $90,000 for staffing costs before opening, the branding agency, the website, the photography. Then a final $70,000 when he said there were unexpected permitting delays and he needed to cover operating costs before the first dollar came in. Each time I wired money, I asked to see the invoices. The first 2 times, he sent them. The third time, he said he was handling it and I was micromanaging. The fourth time, he got quiet and cold in a way I'd learned meant the conversation was over. I transferred the money anyway. Because I loved him. Because I thought we were a team. In month 15, the restaurant had a soft opening. Friends, some family, a few local food bloggers he'd cultivated. I was there for that one. I helped arrange flowers on the tables. I stayed until midnight washing glasses because 2 of the staff didn't show. I drove home exhausted and proud and thinking we did it. In month 17, there was the grand opening. The real one. Press, investors, a local TV segment, a James Beard-adjacent chef he'd convinced to come in for the night. I found out about it from my mother-in-law. Not from my husband, from his mother, who called me to ask what I was wearing. "I'm sorry," I said. "To the opening," she said, in that tone she had, the one that always made me feel like I was missing a memo that everyone else had received. "Saturday night. You do know about it." I didn't. I said I'd check with him and call her back. I hung up and sat with that for a long moment. Then I walked into the room where he was on his laptop and I asked, very calmly, about the opening on Saturday. He didn't look up right away. That small hesitation told me everything. "It's mostly industry people," he said. "Investors, press contacts. My mother's coming because she helped connect me with the PR firm. And I'm not invited." "It's not that you're not invited, it's that you wouldn't It's a networking thing. You don't know these people. It would be awkward. I put in $540,000, I said. He looked up then. And what I saw on his face wasn't guilt, exactly. It was something worse. It was mild irritation, the kind you'd feel if someone was making a big deal out of nothing. You're my wife, he said. Not an investor. Investors don't come to these things either. I'm not an investor? You know what I mean? I didn't say anything else. I went to bed early that night and I lay there in the dark thinking about my mother's voice on my wedding day. Make sure you always have your own money, baby. And I thought I was building something with mine. I thought that's what I was doing. Saturday came, he got dressed up and left at 6. I ordered Thai food and watched a documentary about coral reefs, and I thought, with absolute clarity, that I needed to talk to a lawyer. Not because the marriage was over. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready to be there. But because something had shifted in me that night in the kitchen, when he said awkward and looked at me like I was making a scene. I needed to understand what I actually had. What was mine? What was protected? What wasn't? My cousin is a paralegal. I called her Sunday morning. Tell me what you know about business ownership and marital assets in North Carolina, I said. She was quiet for a second. Okay, she said slowly. Tell me what's going on. I told her. All of it. The transfers, the amounts, the agreement we'd made verbally, the soft opening, the grand opening I wasn't invited to. She listened without interrupting, which is not like her at all, which told me she was taking it seriously. Okay, she said when I finished. First thing, did you ever put anything in writing? The repayment agreement? No. She made a sound. Do you have records of all the transfers? Yes, I have everything. Bank statements, dates, amounts. Good. That's good. Do you know if he put the business in his name only or jointly? I didn't know. I realized I didn't know. I'd never asked to see the business registration documents. I'd just wired money and trusted. Find out, she said. And then call me back. And maybe also call an actual attorney. I found out the next day. I had access to our shared filing cabinet. We'd always kept important documents there, taxes, insurance, things like that. I went through it while he was at the restaurant and I found the LLC registration for the restaurant, his name. Just his name. I took photos of every document in that folder. Then I went back to the kitchen and made coffee and sat down and started looking at what else I had. My own accounts, my own assets, property we owned together, property in my name alone. I'd bought a condo before we got married. A small 2-bedroom I'd been renting out for years. That was mine, fully mine, in my name. Then I started looking at our joint accounts more carefully. There were 3 wire transfers I didn't recognize. Not to the restaurant vendors I knew about. To an account I didn't recognize. The amounts were $12,000, $18,500, and $9,000, over a period of about 8 months. I stared at those numbers for a long time. I called an attorney that afternoon. Her name was Ms. O'Coffer, except wait, that name's from somewhere else. I'll just say she was a family law attorney my cousin recommended, someone who specialized in marital asset disputes. We met at her office that Thursday. I brought everything. Bank records, the LLC paperwork, the transfer history. She went through it the way doctors look at x-rays, slowly, without reacting. These 3 transfers, she said finally. Do you know what they're for? No. Does your husband have authority to make transfers from this joint account unilaterally? Technically, yes. We both do. Has he explained these to you? I haven't asked him yet. I wanted to know what I was looking at first. She nodded. Smart. She looked at the LLC registration again. He's the sole owner of the business entity. Your contributions were not documented as equity investment or as a loan. In North Carolina, absent a written agreement, money transferred from a marital account is generally considered a marital asset used for a joint purpose, but money from your separate premarital accounts is a different story. Do you have documentation showing which funds came from where? Yes, I said. Detailed. She looked at me over her glasses. Then you're in better shape than you think. I drove home that evening feeling something I hadn't expected. Not dread, Not grief. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you've been walking through fog for a long time and then the wind shifts and you can suddenly see exactly where you are. He came home late that night. He was in a good mood, the restaurant had been packed, a review was coming out the following week, one of the investors was talking about a second location. He was glowing. I waited until he settled, until he poured himself a drink and sat down on the couch. I need to ask you about some transfers from the joint account, I said. His expression didn't change immediately. Just a slight stilling, like an animal that's heard something in the grass. What transfers? I showed him the bank statement. The three amounts, the dates, the account number. Those were expenses, he said. For the restaurant. The restaurant vendors are all in the business account, I said. These came from our joint personal account, and the receiving account doesn't match any vendor I recognize. It was a contractor. I needed to pay him quickly. The business account had a hold. A hold for 8 months, 3 separate times. He put down his drink. Why are you doing this right now? The restaurant is finally taking off. I thought you'd be happy. I would like to know where $39,500 went, I said very calmly. He stood up, and then he said the thing that I think he'd been building to saying for a while. The thing he maybe thought would end the conversation. I've been carrying a lot of stress with this launch, he said. I've been working 18-hour days. I needed to handle some things privately, and I didn't want to worry you. You've been very focused on the financial side of this instead of just supporting the vision, and honestly, that's been hard for me. I looked at him for a long moment. The financial side, I said, is $500,000 that I personally transferred to make this vision possible. I know that, and I don't need appreciation, I said. I need an explanation for $39,500. He said he'd look into it and explain later. He went to bed. I sat in the living room for another 2 hours, and I thought about the word privately. He'd needed to handle some things privately. I'd been his wife for 4 years. I'd given him my savings, and he had things he handled privately. I called the attorney the next morning and told her I was ready to move forward. The next few weeks I moved quietly. This is what people don't tell you about situations like this. The hardest part isn't the anger, it's the performance. Going to his family's Sunday dinner and passing the bread rolls and asking his father about his golf game, congratulating him when the restaurant review came out. 4 stars. He framed it and hung it by the door. I hung it there. He handed it to me and I climbed on a step stool and put the nail in the wall myself. Meanwhile, I was doing things. I opened a new personal account at a different bank and began redirecting my direct deposit. I spoke with a financial advisor, someone who dealt specifically with divorce asset situations, and we mapped out exactly what was mine, what was joint and what was commingled. The premarital savings I'd transferred, $540,000. Of that, $320,000 could be cleanly traced to my separate premarital account. The remaining $220,000 came from joint funds, which was more complicated. I had my attorney draft a formal demand letter requesting documentation of all business expenditures funded by my separate premarital assets, as well as an accounting of the 3 unidentified transfers. She sent it to him via certified mail. He came home that night with the letter in his hand, and his face had changed completely. The calm, successful restaurant owner was gone. What was standing in my kitchen was someone I recognized from the early days. Someone a little panicked, a little scrambling. "What is this?" he said. "It's a formal request for documentation," I said. "My attorney sent it." "Your attorney? You got an attorney without telling me. You opened an LLC without telling me," I said. "We're even." That's completely different. That's a business decision. Transferring $540,000 of my personal savings and not being listed anywhere on the business entity is also a business decision, I said. I just like it documented. He sat down. He looked, for the first time since I'd known him, genuinely unsure of what to say. "I was going to add you," he said. "Once things stabilized, I didn't want you to have liability exposure if things went wrong in the first year." "That's thoughtful," I said. "Your attorney can explain that to my attorney." The next thing that happened was his mother called me. She had clearly been briefed because she led with exactly the wrong thing. "I don't know what's gotten into you," she said. "He has worked so hard. That restaurant is going to be worth 3 times what you put in 2 years. You'll benefit from it as his wife." "As his wife," I said. "Yes, you should be proud of him." "I wasn't invited to the launch," I said, "of the restaurant I funded." Silence. "It was a business event, I know. He told me I wouldn't fit in." I paused. "I just want you to know that I remember that. I'll always remember that." She had nothing to say to that. We hung up. My husband tried several approaches over the following weeks. The apologetic approach. He was sorry, he should have included me, he'd gotten caught up, things had moved fast. The strategic approach. "Can't we work this out between us? Attorneys make everything adversarial. We don't need that." The guilt approach. "After everything I've done to build this, you're going to do this to me now?" I listened to all of it. I said very little. What I knew and what he didn't know I knew was what my attorney had found when she dug into the 3 transfers. The $39,500 had gone to a woman my husband had been involved with for approximately 11 months, which overlapped almost exactly with the period of the restaurant build-out. She had received money from our joint account. He had used money that was at least partially mine to maintain a relationship with someone else. My attorney presented this as part of a broader financial misconduct claim. In North Carolina, dissipation of marital assets, using joint money for an affair, is considered an equitable distribution. It doesn't automatically guarantee a specific outcome, but it matters. It goes into the record. He didn't know we had found that until the first formal mediation session. I watched his face when his attorney leaned in and whispered to him. I watched the color change. I kept my hands folded in my lap and my expression neutral, and I thought, 4 years. Mediation took 3 sessions. His attorney pushed back on the premarital asset argument. The standard move is to claim commingling, to argue that once money goes into a joint account or a shared project, it loses its separate character. My attorney was very good and very prepared and had documentation I had spent months quietly assembling. We settled. I won't give the exact number, but what I can tell you is that I recovered the full $320,000 traceable to my premarital separate account, plus a negotiated portion of the joint funds, plus a cash settlement related to the dissipation claim. The restaurant remained in his name. He kept his vision. He kept his 4-star review on the wall. I kept my money. I kept my condo. I kept the financial advisory relationship I built in the years before I made the mistake of trusting someone else with my savings. I'm 32 now. I live in the condo I bought at 25, which I renovated last spring. New floors, open kitchen, a bathroom I designed exactly the way I wanted, with nobody else's opinion in the room. I have a financial planner I meet with quarterly. I have a mother who I called the week the settlement was finalized, and when I told her the number, she went quiet for a moment and then said, "You got yours back." "I got mine back," I said. "That's all I ever wanted for you," she said. "There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I'd put the investment in writing. I wish I'd required my name on the LLC from day one. I wish I had listened a little more carefully to the small moments. The times he called me worried about the financials like that was a character flaw. The times he handled things privately, like privacy was his right, and transparency was optional. Those moments were telling me something. I just wasn't fluent in that language yet. But I'll say this. The woman who walked out of that mediation is someone my 24-year-old self would recognize, but also someone she'd be a little afraid of. Not in the bad way, in the way that you recognize someone who has learned something that cannot be unlearned. My money built something. He is welcome to it. I built something too. It just took a little longer to see it. I keep thinking about the step stool. The week after the 4-star review came out, my husband handed me the framed article and asked me to hang it by the front door, and I did. I climbed up, put the nail in the wall, centered the frame, stepped down, and said it looked great. That moment, that specific, ordinary moment, is the one I come back to most. Not the mediation room, not the attorney's office, not the night I found the transfers. The step stool. Because that was the version of me who had already decided, who already knew, and who was still capable of hanging a picture straight and saying it looked great. That steadiness, I think, was the only thing that saved me. There's a version of this story where I confronted him the night I found the transfers, screamed, threw things, demanded answers at midnight. I've heard that version from other women. I understand it, but I also know that the anger, as real as it was, would have scattered everything I needed to keep organized. What I'd learned, slowly, over months of watching money move in ways I didn't authorize, was that clarity is more powerful than volume. Knowing exactly what you have, and exactly what someone has taken, and exactly what the law says about it, that is not a cold thing. It is the most protective thing you can do for yourself. My mother told me on my wedding day to keep my own money. I heard her. I just didn't hear her completely. I kept my own accounts, yes. But I still transferred $540,000 into someone else's vision without a single document protecting my interest. I thought love was the protection. I thought trust was the contract. What I know now is that love and documentation are not opposites. They are not in conflict. A person who loves you will sign the paper. A person who says the paper means you don't trust them is telling you something important about what they plan to do with your trust. That is the thing I would go back and say to my 28-year-old self. Not, don't do it, because I think I needed to live it to understand it. But the paper is love too. Protecting yourself is not a failure of faith. It is the most honest thing you can offer another person, because it means you are entering the arrangement with your eyes open, not just your heart. What I had to rebuild after everything, and it did feel like rebuilding even with the money recovered, was the belief that I was someone whose judgment could be trusted again. Not his judgment. Mine. Because somewhere along the way I had started outsourcing my instincts. He called me worried about the financials like it was a character flaw. I started to believe him a little. I started to soften my own questions, to apologize for wanting documentation, to frame my own due diligence as anxiety rather than intelligence. Getting that back, the straightforward trust in my own thinking, took longer than the legal process. I'm not angry at who I was. She loved someone, and she bet on him, and she kept meticulous records even when she wasn't sure why. And when the moment came, those records were everything. That is not nothing. That is actually someone who, even in the middle of being foolish about love, never completely stopped being clear-eyed about money. The two things lived in me at once. In the end, one of them protected the other. My money built his restaurant. That is true, and I have made my peace with it. What I built is harder to see, but it is mine in a way nothing else has ever been. The knowledge of exactly what I can withstand, the habit of protecting myself without apology, and the absolute certainty that the next chapter I fund will have my name on it from the very first document.